Hey everyone. We are so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers. Please smash that subscribe button and help our unveiled family reach our goal. Thanks to everyone who has already subscribed. We love you. Now to the video. I still don't know what convinced me to say yes to a rooftop date at night, because it already sounds like something out of a weird thriller when I say it out loud now. But when we matched on Hinge, she made it sound harmless, fun, different. She said she loved city views and quiet places where you could actually talk without feeling judged. She had this chilled vibe in her messages, kind of playful, kind of mysterious in a cute way. Nothing about her came across as someone planning something strange. She suggested the rooftop like it was the most normal thing in the world. She said her building had public access to it and that she goes up there all the time to get some air. The idea sounded weird, but at the same time, I'd been bored for so long that the thought of doing something slightly different actually sounded interesting. Plus, it was a busy building, a decent area, and she didn't act sketchy at all. When I arrived, she buzzed me in fast. She came down to greet me at the lobby, smiling like she'd rehearsed the moment. She grabbed my hand for a second and pulled me toward the lift, talking quickly about how nice the view was going to be. I was trying to keep up with the energy, but something about how excited she was felt a bit too intense. We got to the top floor and she led me to this metal door that opened onto the rooftop. The minute she pushed it open, cold air hit us, and the whole city lit up in front of me. She wasn't lying, the view was nice. Really nice actually. You could see the lights stretching forever. She walked ahead first, almost bouncing, telling me to follow her to the far side. The rooftop had plants scattered around in big pots, a few chairs and fairy lights someone must have put up ages ago. It all looked kind of romantic but also kind of abandoned. I stepped closer to the edge and looked around. Then something caught my eye. A tripod. Just the legs poking out from behind a plant pot. I tried to tell myself maybe the building used it for maintenance or something. But then I spotted another one on the opposite side of the rooftop, half hidden behind a stack of crates. And another one behind a metal chair. 3 total. All facing toward the middle of the rooftop where she was now standing like she was waiting for something. I tried to act normal. Maybe she was into photography. Maybe she filmed sunsets or city time lapses. I told myself not to jump to weird conclusions. But then I noticed the lights. Small, portable LED ones. Tucked behind plant pots. Angled upward. I recognized that setup because I've seen enough behind-the-scenes stuff online to know what filming lights look like. She noticed me scanning the rooftop and walked back over quickly, telling me to relax. She said the building had stuff stored up here sometimes. It sounded forced. Overly casual. Like she hadn't prepared that lie very well. I was about to ask her what the lights were for when a buzzing sound filled the air. Low at first, then louder. I turned around toward the sky and saw it. A drone. Coming straight toward us. It hovered above, then tilted slightly like it was framing the shot. The lights from the drone flickered red and green. It stayed perfectly still, pointed at us like someone was controlling it from somewhere close. She didn't react at all. She just smiled. Not a normal smile. A tight one. Practiced. At that point my whole body went stiff. Everything around me suddenly made too much sense. The tripods. The lights. The drone. The weird excitement she had the entire time. She wasn't nervous because of me. She was excited because whatever this was, it was already happening. I tried to move back slowly, but she stepped closer like she didn't want me leaving the center of the rooftop. She kept talking, but her words didn't match her expression. She was trying too hard to keep me in one spot. I wanted to run, but the door felt too far away, and the idea of turning my back on her made my chest tighten. Before I could decide what to do, the drone jerked upward suddenly, then spun slightly as if distracted by something behind us. She froze. Not scared, more like annoyed. And then everything exploded. The metal rooftop door slammed open so hard the entire surface shook. Officers ran out in plain clothes but with vests and torches, shouting commands. I jumped back instantly, hands up before I even processed it. She didn't move. She just closed her eyes like she knew this exact moment was coming. The officers swarmed her like they had been waiting for this specific rooftop on this specific night. One of them grabbed her arms while another kicked over one of the hidden lights, making the rooftop go dim again. Another officer pointed a torch straight at the drone and yelled something into his radio. The drone hovered uncertainly, then started drifting backward like whoever was controlling it was panicking. 2 officers grabbed me and pulled me behind them fast, telling me to stay down. I didn't argue. My legs barely worked anyway. One officer kept repeating her full name, confirming they had the right person. They said she'd been running a viral fake kidnapping channel online, pretending to be abducting people on rooftops, in alleys, in stairwells, all staged like real kidnappings to bait viewers. The whole thing had blown up because people thought her videos were actual crimes. Turns out she'd been using Hinge dates as unsuspecting victims for the next episode. The officers explained in rushed voices that they'd been tracking her locations and setups for days. She never used the same place twice until tonight. They got the tip earlier that there'd be a recording and the drone confirmed it. She still didn't say a word. She just stared at the ground while they cuffed her. The drone hovered helplessly, still recording, its blinking lights flashing against her face. One of the officers threw something at it, maybe a tracker jammer or something, and the drone sputtered and crashed down near the edge of the rooftop. When they pulled her toward the door, she turned her head slightly and looked at me. Not angry. Not scared. Just disappointed. Like I ruined her episode. The officers escorted me down the stairs, asking if she had tried anything or said anything unusual. I told them everything, the lights, the tripods, the drone, the weird energy the whole night. They wrote it down quickly. The hallway echoed with noise from the other officers bringing equipment out of her flat and searching for whoever controlled the drone. When I finally stepped outside the building, I felt like I had stepped out of a set. Police cars everywhere. People watching from windows. The sky above still buzzing faintly from whatever tech they were using to track drones. She was pushed into the back of one of the cars, still calm, still not talking, still staring straight ahead like she was thinking about how she'd edit the footage if she ever got the chance. I walked home replaying everything. The way she smiled. The way the tripods were placed. The way the drone hovered like it already knew its cue. I kept thinking that if the police had been a few minutes slower, I would have ended up in some clipped-up video online labeled as victim number whatever.
I swear this was one of those dates where everything felt normal at the start, and that's probably why it messed with my head so much. Nothing about him looked off when we matched on Hinge. He messaged like a regular guy, not too dry, not too intense, just normal. He joked about the awful weather, talked about work in the most boring way possible, and asked if I wanted to grab food somewhere casual. It didn't feel forced at all, so I said yes. The restaurant we picked was one of those cozy places with low lights and loud chatter, nothing fancy. I got there a bit early and sat by the window. He arrived right on time, smiling like he had all the time in the world. He looked put together but not in that stiff way, just a hoodie, clean hair, fresh trainers. He seemed calm. Too calm, honestly, but I didn't think anything of it. We sat down, ordered drinks, and started talking. The first red flag was small, barely noticeable. His phone kept lighting up. He didn't stare at it like some guys do, he just glanced, locked it, and kept talking. After a few minutes, it buzzed again. And again. And again. He tried to act casual, but he was clearly tracking something. His eyes kept moving down to the table between sentences. Then he said he needed to step outside for a quick call. I didn't mind at first. People get calls all the time. He walked out, phone pressed to his ear, pacing outside the window. He didn't look stressed, just focused. He spoke fast, hands moving a little. I couldn't hear anything, but he didn't look like someone talking to a friend or family member. He came back after maybe 2 minutes, apologized quickly, then went right back into conversation like nothing happened. I tried to ease the mood by talking about food or movies or whatever random topics came into my head, but every few minutes his eyes flicked to the door. And then his phone buzzed again. Second time, he didn't even explain. He just stood up mid-sentence, said he needed to deal with something, and walked straight outside. He didn't look annoyed, he looked like he expected the call. I watched him through the window again. Same fast talking. Same pacing. Same sharp movements with his hands like he was giving instructions. I tried telling myself it was work. People deal with stressful jobs. Maybe he had an emergency to sort out. Maybe he was a manager somewhere and needed to handle something. But something about the way he kept scanning the street made my stomach twist. He kept checking corners, checking cars, checking random people walking past. He came back again and forced a smile that didn't even match his eyes. I was already debating whether I should leave early, but I didn't want to be rude. He kept apologizing, but not in that sincere way, more like he just needed me to be patient a little longer. Then the third call happened. The phone buzzed louder this time. He grabbed it so fast it startled me. He read whatever popped up, stood up immediately, and his whole vibe changed. He muttered something to himself, not to me, then practically rushed outside without looking back. This time he didn't pace. He stood still, staring down at his screen, tapping something quickly. His head kept turning toward the street like he was waiting for someone to show up. I sat inside, pretending to look at the menu, but my brain was running wild. Something wasn't right. You don't go outside 3 times on a first date just to talk about work. And you definitely don't stare at the street like you're checking who's approaching. I was about to grab my coat and make an excuse when the restaurant door burst open and everything got loud instantly. Officers. At least 6 of them. Not in uniforms, plain clothes, but clearly armed. They moved in quick, splitting into groups like they'd planned this for days. People at tables froze, forks halfway to their mouths, conversations dying mid-sentence. One of the officers pointed straight at the door, shouting for the guy to come back inside. Another officer headed toward me fast and told me to stand and follow them quietly. I didn't even understand what was happening. I just did what he said because he said it in a tone that made my whole body lock up. They led me toward the back hallway that connected to the kitchen. I saw chefs staring at us like they were watching a movie. One officer stayed with me while the others moved toward the front. I could hear shouting. Chairs scraping. Someone being pushed against a wall. People whispering and panicking. Then one of the officers told me what was actually happening. The guy wasn't taking calls from work. He had been coordinating an illegal delivery drop. Not parcels. Not food. Real illegal items being moved across the city. He wasn't just part of it, he was one of the coordinators, making sure the runners got to the right place at the right time. Those buzzing notifications weren't messages from friends. They were updates from people doing the drops. One of the runners had already been caught earlier that evening, and when the officers checked his messages, they found live conversations with the guy I was literally eating with. That third call? That was him confirming the drop was on the way. And the reason the officers stormed the restaurant was because the runner had read out the exact meeting point before being taken in. Right outside the restaurant. Right before he came back inside. I felt sick. I kept thinking about how he kept smiling at me like he wasn't planning anything. How he acted calm while juggling crimes in the background. I was literally on a date with someone who used me as cover. All those calls weren't emergencies, they were transactions. After a minute, the officers brought him through the restaurant. He wasn't calm anymore. They dragged him past the tables as people stared in shock. Someone whispered if he had a weapon. Someone else pulled their kid closer. His face was twisted in anger and frustration. He looked nothing like the guy who smiled at me 20 minutes earlier. I don't think he even looked for me. His eyes were locked on the officers holding him. They took him out through the front while they made me leave through the back so I wouldn't get caught up in the chaos. I walked through the back alley with one of the officers, my whole body shaking. Customers inside were still whispering, dishes clattering as the staff tried to pretend everything was normal again. When I finally got outside, the police cars lit up the street. The runner they'd caught earlier was in one van. The guy from my date was being shoved into another. The officers asked me a few questions, confirmed I didn't know him personally, then told me I could go home. I walked home feeling like I'd just stepped out of someone else's nightmare. The date didn't even last an hour, but the whole time he had been juggling crimes while pretending to be interested in me. And I kept thinking about how normal he looked. How ordinary he seemed until everything cracked open.
I should have trusted my first instinct because something felt weird before I even stepped inside her house, but I kept brushing it off because she seemed normal when we talked on Hinge. She wasn't loud or dramatic or trying too hard. She messaged like someone who actually wanted to meet, not someone dragging a conversation on for days. Her pictures looked simple too, mostly her in hoodies, messy hair, and no forced poses. She seemed down to earth, and honestly I wasn't expecting anything strange. She told me to come over because she didn't feel like going out. I didn't think that was odd because a lot of people prefer staying in. And since she didn't live far, I agreed. When I arrived outside her place, the first thing I noticed was how quiet the street was. Not creepy quiet, just that normal weekend stillness. Her house looked normal too, not run down or overly done up. Just plain. She opened the door fast like she'd been standing right behind it. She smiled, but there was something tight about it, like she was pretending everything was fine. She let me in quickly and then closed the door even quicker. I thought maybe she was cold or didn't want bugs coming in or something, but she locked the door, then checked it again, then checked it a third time. Like she was following some routine in her head she couldn't skip. I just stood there awkwardly while she tugged at the handle to make sure it was shut. She told me to make myself comfortable, but then she rushed to the living room and started closing all the curtains. Not normally. She yanked them shut, then stepped back, then pulled them tighter like she wanted to make sure not a sliver of light or view came through. Then she did the same to the window near the dining table. Tug, pull, recheck. She kept saying she just liked her privacy. I wanted to believe that, but the way she moved felt too frantic. Like someone checking if a monster was outside. Her breathing wasn't heavy, but she kept glancing at the windows like she expected someone to be staring through them. I tried to play it off in my head. Some people get anxious. Maybe she didn't like neighbors watching. Maybe she'd had some weird past issue with someone. I tried not to judge too quick. She sat down on the sofa and patted the space next to her, acting like nothing happened, so I sat. The whole time we were talking, she kept doing these tiny things that made everything feel off. Like she'd tilt her head slightly like she heard something. Or she'd glance at the hallway like she was waiting for someone to come out. She kept asking if I heard anything, but she'd say it in a way that made it sound like she was talking to herself instead of me. I noticed her eyes flick toward the wardrobe in the corner every few minutes. She tried to act like she wasn't doing it, but it was too obvious. The wardrobe was tall, old-looking, and slightly cracked open. I thought maybe she had a pet in there or something random like that. But the longer I sat there, the more the air felt heavy. Like someone else was in the house. She kept talking fast, almost rambling at times. Whenever I looked at her properly, she'd smile too quickly, like she didn't want me wondering about anything. I asked her if she was okay at one point, but she just nodded aggressively like she wanted the conversation to skip past that topic immediately. The weirdest moment before everything exploded was when something inside the wardrobe made the tiniest sound. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a small bump like someone shifting their weight. She froze instantly. Her whole body locked up, but only for a moment. Then she forced another smile, asked me a random question, and pretended she didn't hear anything. I pretended too, but my heart was already beating too fast because nothing about that sound felt normal. I started thinking maybe someone else lived with her and she forgot to mention it. Or maybe she had a roommate who didn't like guests. I kept trying to come up with normal explanations because my brain didn't want to accept the weird one. Then, out of nowhere, everything went from strange to insane. There was a smash at the front door. Not a knock. Not someone kicking it accidentally. A full-on hit that rattled the walls. Before I even had time to stand, the door burst open and armed officers rushed in shouting commands. I've never seen men move that fast in my life. They spread out instantly, pointing their weapons, telling us not to move. She didn't scream. She didn't even look surprised. She just stared at them like she'd been expecting this moment for days. I sat frozen, hands raised, shaking so much I could barely breathe. One officer came right up to me, checking if I was armed. Another officer grabbed her and pulled her away from the sofa. They kept asking where he was. I didn't know who they meant, but she kept saying nothing. She looked at the wardrobe once. Just once. And that was enough for them. 2 officers stormed straight toward it. One ripped the door open. And there he was. Her brother. Curled inside, knees up, eyes staring at us like he'd been awake the whole time. He didn't look confused or tired or weak. He looked alert. Like he'd been listening to every word we said. He jumped forward like he was going to run for it, but the officers tackled him instantly, forcing him down so hard the wardrobe shook. They cuffed him while he fought back, twisting and yelling. She kept screaming his name, telling them not to hurt him. The officers kept shouting over both of them, pinning him down until he stopped trying to escape. Another officer pulled me away, asking if I knew who he was. I said no because I had no clue what any of this was. The officer explained quickly, still out of breath, that her brother had been wanted for kidnapping someone 3 days earlier. He'd been hiding ever since. They had intel that someone inside her house was helping him. They'd been watching her place and noticed patterns. Curtains always closed, noises late at night, her never leaving the house alone. I felt sick. The whole time I'd been sitting there with her, he'd been hiding a few feet away listening to us talk like everything was normal. Every time she looked at the wardrobe, she wasn't checking clothes. She was checking him. Every time she closed a curtain or triple-checked a lock, she wasn't being dramatic. She was trying to keep him hidden long enough for the search to die down. But it didn't. The officers dragged him out the front door while she cried and kept trying to follow him. One officer held her back while the rest got him into the van. I stood there in the middle of the living room, surrounded by overturned furniture and shouting and footsteps. But all I could think about was that bump from the wardrobe. That tiny sound. He had been there the entire time. Listening. Waiting. Breathing behind the door like some shadow I didn't know existed. When they took her outside too, she looked at me once. Not angry, not sad. Just tired. Like she knew this was coming and had hoped a stranger from Hinge could distract her long enough to pretend it wasn't happening. I left after the officers finished taking my statement. I walked home in silence, replaying every glance she made, every curtain she pulled, every time her eyes flicked toward that wardrobe. And now whenever I sit in someone's living room, I always check behind closed doors without making it obvious.
I didn't plan on meeting anyone that day, not even a little. I was actually supposed to go home after running errands, but I ended up opening Hinge because I was bored waiting for my drink at a cafe. That's when this guy messaged me. He seemed normal enough in that quick scroll kind of way. Clean haircut, simple clothes, nothing flashy. His profile gave this soft, friendly vibe like he was just some chilled guy who liked coffee and long walks. Nothing about him looked strange. Not even a hint. He replied fast, like he had his phone in his hand already. His energy was calm but direct. He didn't waste time with long messages or weird questions. He just asked if I wanted to meet since we were already near the same area. I don't usually say yes that quickly, but I was already out and tired of scrolling, so I thought why not? It felt harmless enough. We picked a cafe not too far from me. It was busy, loads of people, the kind of place where you don't even notice anything outside the sound of cups being stacked and chairs scraping the floor. I got there first and sat near the window. He arrived a minute later, smiling like everything was perfectly timed. We said hi and sat down. He seemed a little stiff at first, but not in a sketchy way, just like he was trying to make a good first impression. He asked if I wanted anything, and before I could even answer properly, he took his phone out. At first I thought he was checking a text or something, but then he flipped the camera toward himself, angled it weirdly low, and took a selfie. I wasn't even in the frame. Maybe like half my hair in the corner. I didn't react because people take random pictures all the time. I thought he was just being goofy. But then he did it again. And again. Always quick snaps with that same weird angle. He barely looked at the photos after taking them. He just glanced for half a second and then moved on with the conversation like nothing happened. He kept saying he was documenting the moment. I didn't even understand what that meant. Who documents moments with selfies that barely show the person they're actually with? He didn't ask me to pose. He didn't try to get a picture of us together. He just kept taking pictures that had me barely on the edge. The whole time we were talking, his phone stayed on the table with the camera app open. I tried to ignore it and focus on the convo. He asked what I liked to do, where I live, small stuff. He didn't sound creepy. He didn't act nervous. But he was too focused on those selfies. Every few minutes, his phone would buzz. Not loudly, just that soft vibration. He'd glance at the screen but never unlock it. The notifications came in so often that I started counting them without meaning to. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. Another buzz. Sometimes he'd take a selfie right after the buzz. Like he was responding to someone without actually typing anything. At one point he leaned in slightly, holding the phone outward, snapping another picture with me half in it. I looked at myself in the tiny preview reflection and felt weird. I wasn't even recognizable. It was like I was just part of the scenery for whatever he was doing. I was trying to figure out whether to ask him about it or just end the date early when the cafe door opened and everything shifted. 2 officers walked straight in. Not loud, not dramatic, but with that energy that makes everyone freeze for a second. They didn't look around the room. They walked directly toward our table. My stomach dropped. I thought something happened to someone I knew. One officer asked if I was okay. I nodded, confused. Then they asked him to stand up. Not yelling, just this firm tone like they already knew everything they needed. The guy went pale instantly. He tried to hide his phone under his hand. The officer nearest him told him not to move it. He pulled his hand away slowly, like a kid caught in the middle of something. They cuffed him quietly. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He just whispered something under his breath that I didn't catch. Then one of the officers sat next to me and told me they'd been tracking him for months. That's when I realized how bad it actually was. They said he had several fake profiles on different apps, not just Hinge. He used different names, different pictures, different personalities. He messed with women, making them think he was someone trustworthy. Then he'd get money from them by making up emergencies or guilt-tripping them. Some gave him hundreds. Some gave him more. He kept everything organized on his phone, using selfies with the girls as proof of being with them when he needed to fake alibis or timelines. That's why he kept taking those weird selfies. He wasn't documenting the moment for fun. He was collecting evidence. Not for memories. For manipulation. To show other people he was busy or with someone whenever they questioned him or tried to expose him. The buzzing on his phone wasn't messages from friends. It was notifications from his fake accounts, conversations he kept juggling with other women. The officer showed me one of the profiles on a printed sheet. It had his face, but not his name. Then another one with him wearing different clothes. Then another one using a totally different age. All of them were him. All of them were lies. I felt sick. Not scared exactly, just disgusted that I sat across from someone who had a whole digital maze built around tricking women. The officer asked me to come outside for a moment to give a quick statement. When I stepped out of the cafe, I froze because there were 3 other women standing there with officers. They weren't talking to each other. They looked angry, embarrassed, tired. Like they'd been through something they didn't want to admit out loud. One of them recognized him instantly when they brought him out. She looked at him like she'd been waiting months for that exact moment. Another girl was crying quietly. The third one didn't even look at him. She stood there with her arms crossed and stared at the floor. I gave my statement quickly. They told me I wasn't in trouble and that I didn't have anything to worry about, but that didn't stop the weird feeling in my stomach. I kept thinking about how he kept taking those pictures with me slightly in the corner. I wondered how many other girls had been used like that. How many dates he never cared about at all. When they put him in the police car, he didn't look at anyone. He just stared straight ahead like he'd been red-handed but still thought he could talk his way out somehow. The 3 women watched him being driven away. None of them said anything. I walked home after that, replaying the whole date in my head. Every selfie. Every buzz. Every time he angled the phone just right so I was barely in it. And the whole time I had no clue I was just another name on whatever list he had inside that phone.
I don't know why I even agreed to meet her because the whole thing already felt slightly weird from the start, but in that harmless way where you just think the person is quirky. She messaged me first on Hinge and seemed really sweet. Like properly sweet. Every reply she sent felt bubbly and quick, like she was actually excited to talk instead of forcing it. Her pictures looked casual too, not those overly edited ones. Just her in random places, smiling like she didn't care about angles. I thought she was just chill. But she had this one thing she kept bringing up. This one specific bench in a park near the river. She mentioned it 3 separate times without me even asking. She said it had the best view, that she always sat there, that she liked meeting people there because it was peaceful. I didn't think much of it at first. Then she insisted on that exact bench again when we were making plans. Not the park. Not the area. The bench. Like the rest of the park didn't even exist. I probably should have questioned it more, but I didn't. I just said fine because meeting outside in a busy park seemed safer than going to someone's place or a quiet spot. The day of the date, I got there a bit early. It was one of those warm afternoons where the park was full of people walking their dogs, kids yelling, cyclists weaving through everyone. It didn't feel dangerous or anything. It felt normal. I found the bench straight away because she described it so specifically. It was right next to a path with tons of people passing by. I sat down and waited, scrolling through my phone because I always get awkward waiting alone. After a minute or two, I looked up and saw her walking toward me. She looked exactly like her pictures, same hair, same smile, same little skip in her step. She waved and sat down next to me like we'd known each other already. The only weird thing she did was glance around a lot. Not at people's faces, more at the path behind us. She didn't look scared. She looked like she was expecting someone. But she kept talking normally to me, asking me questions about random stuff like food and what music I like. She wasn't distracted when she spoke, but every time someone walked close behind the bench, her eyes would flick up for a split second. I thought maybe she was just checking for friends or something. Or maybe she'd had a bad date before and wanted to make sure no one was following her. I didn't want to judge too fast. I was trying to be patient. But the more we sat there, the more it felt like her focus wasn't really on me. She kept adjusting her bag on her lap like she was waiting to take something out but kept delaying it. At one point she shifted slightly and I heard something inside her bag. Not coins or keys. Something thick sliding around. She quickly zipped it more, then pretended she was just fixing the strap. And then she did that scanning thing again, looking at the path behind us like she was waiting for someone specific. I didn't get a chance to ask her anything because everything happened so fast I still replay it in my head. I had just leaned back on the bench, trying to relax and pull the conversation back into something normal, when 2 guys in hoodies suddenly rushed toward us from across the grass. My first thought was that someone was about to get robbed. They didn't look like officers at all. They looked like 2 random dudes sprinting straight at me. Before I could stand up, they grabbed someone behind me. I hadn't even realized someone was approaching the bench because I was facing forward. The girl next to me jumped up instantly, backing away like she knew exactly who they were after. The 2 guys forced someone onto the ground behind us, a guy who was holding a small bag that had spilled open. I heard the contents scatter on the pavement. Cards. Loads of them. Different colors, different names. Plainclothes officers. That's when everything snapped into place because one of them pulled out a badge while keeping his knee on the runner's back. The girl stepped away even more and one officer turned to her, calling her by her full name. She froze completely. She didn't run, didn't protest, just shut down like she knew the whole thing was over. The officer near her started talking fast, telling her to put the bag down slowly. She hesitated for a second and then placed it on the bench. The zip slid open slightly and inside I could see exactly what I thought I heard earlier. Stacks of bank cards. Not 1. Not 10. Stacks. The officer beside me told me to stay where I was and asked if I was with her. I said I had no clue what was going on. He told me to move away slowly so they could search the bench. My hands were shaking like crazy. I didn't even want to know what they were about to pull out of that bag. Another group of officers turned up within seconds. I didn't even see where they came from. They moved in like they'd been watching the whole thing, waiting for the exact time to jump. 2 of them arrested the girl. She didn't fight it. She looked embarrassed, annoyed, and weirdly calm all at once. She kept glancing at the guy they tackled, like she knew him but wasn't allowed to show it. They searched the runner too. He had a bunch of stolen goods on him, phones, wallets, small items obviously taken quickly from people's bags or pockets. And the bag he dropped had way more cards inside than I thought at first. All stolen. All linked to reports from around the city. The officer later explained everything to me. She wasn't just meeting guys on Hinge because she wanted dates. She used them as decoys. Every time she arranged a meetup, she insisted on a specific location and a specific position. She chose benches and seats that allowed the runner to approach behind the date while blending into the crowd. She would pass him stolen cards inside her bag, acting like she was just sitting casually. The date sitting next to her made it look like she wasn't doing anything suspicious. The runner messed up today because they'd been watching the pattern and figured out she'd be there. The officers knew she used guys as shields because the runner needed to pretend he was just walking past. They caught him right as he was approaching behind me. I didn't move the whole time they explained. I just kept thinking about how I sat there like an idiot while she was waiting for someone to come up behind me. I wasn't a date. I was basically a prop. A distraction. After they took her away, the bench looked completely normal again. Birds flying, people laughing, dogs running. Everything looked fine. But I just stood there feeling like I'd been dropped into someone else's messed up job and didn't even know I was involved until the ending.
I wasn't even supposed to go on a date that night. I'd been in one of those moods where you just want to stay home, order food, and pretend no one exists. But I got bored, opened Hinge, and ended up matching with this guy who seemed normal enough. Nothing flashy, nothing weird. His pictures were simple, just him outside, wearing plain clothes, not posing like he wanted the whole world to admire him. His messages were short but quick, like he didn't overthink what he said. I liked that because most people either write paragraphs or dry one-word replies. He suggested meeting for a quick walk around this shopping area near me. I didn't mind because it felt safe. Lots of people around, cameras everywhere, and it wasn't far from my place. I didn't get any weird vibe from him at first. He seemed calm, polite, and a bit quiet, but not awkward. The only thing that stood out was his phone. He kept checking it in this very specific way. Not like scrolling or unlocking it. He would lift it, tap the screen, look at something for half a second, then put it away again. It wasn't even a text popping up each time. Sometimes the screen was blank. He acted like he was waiting for something only he knew about. At first, I thought maybe his family kept messaging him or he was nervous. But it wasn't like that. It was too precise. Like he was following a schedule or waiting for a signal. Literally waiting for some sort of timing. We walked around the shops, just talking about basic stuff, hobbies, music, work. He wasn't too chatty, but he asked questions. He seemed normal every few minutes, then his eyes would drop to the phone again. He didn't even bother pretending he wasn't checking it. And every time he looked at whatever was on the screen, his whole expression would shift for a second. Not scared, not annoyed, more like he was tracking something. Around halfway through the walk, I noticed something else. He always steered us toward open spaces. He didn't want to go into any shops, even when I suggested it. He kept saying we could check them out later or that they looked busy. But they weren't busy. He just kept choosing paths where you could see everything around you. Like he didn't want to be boxed in. After about an hour, he asked if I wanted to head back toward the car park because he parked there. I said sure because I was getting tired, and honestly my interest was fading because the whole phone thing was making me feel like I wasn't even there. Like I was just a cover while he watched something more important. As we walked toward the car park, he checked his phone again and this time held it slightly longer. His face tightened. He didn't look at me. He just kept walking faster like he suddenly had somewhere to be, but still kept this calm expression like he didn't want me to notice he was speeding up. The whole thing made me feel like I was walking next to someone who wasn't actually on a date at all. The car park was half empty with those dim yellow lights that always make everything look tense. I walked slower because something felt off. He kept glancing behind us and then back at his phone. He didn't say anything, didn't explain. Then he stopped walking completely, stared at the phone like he read something important, and turned around quickly like he was about to head in another direction. Before I could even ask what was happening, two men came out of nowhere. They weren't wearing uniforms, just normal clothes, but they moved straight toward him like they knew him. He tried to back up, but they tackled him to the ground so fast that I jumped away. I thought he was being mugged. One of them grabbed his arms while the other held him down and pulled out handcuffs. I screamed because it didn't make sense. He didn't fight them hard, just kept trying to twist his head away so they couldn't see his phone. He kept saying he didn't do anything, but not to me. It was like he wasn't even thinking about me being there. The whole time, he kept trying to reach for the phone that had fallen on the ground near his hand. One of the men kicked it away and called for backup through a radio. When they stood him up, I finally saw badges clipped to their belts. They were undercover officers. My whole body went cold. I couldn't even speak. One of them asked if I was okay and told me to step back. Another officer checked the area around us, looking between the cars like he expected something else to pop out. They kept asking him where the car was. He kept shaking his head, avoiding the question. One officer grabbed his hood and turned him toward a car parked just a few steps behind us. I hadn't even noticed it because it looked so normal. But one of the officers opened the door and pointed inside. They said it matched a stolen vehicle report from earlier that day. The officer near me explained that they had been tracking him for weeks. Apparently, he wasn't meeting women because he wanted to date anyone. He used Hinge like a map. Every time he arranged a date, he used it as an excuse to move around different areas without looking suspicious. He would wait for a message telling him where the next stolen car was dropped off. The phone checking, the weird glances, the rushing toward the car park, it all made sense suddenly. He wasn't nervous about meeting me. He was nervous about being late to a pickup. The officer said the reason they moved in right then was because they caught the signal on his phone from the people he worked with. Something about a location ping. The stolen car right behind us was the one he was meant to take. That was why he suddenly sped up. He must have got the confirmation just seconds before they took him down. I stood there trying to understand how I ended up standing next to a stolen car in some dim car park at night with undercover officers tackling the guy I thought was just awkward. The officers collected his phone, searched him, and put him in another car. He didn't look at me once. Not even when they drove off. It was like I never existed in his night. I was just part of his route. After everything calmed down, one of the officers told me I was lucky they intercepted it when they did because he had been involved with a group stealing cars from different areas. They used Hinge dates so he could move around without being noticed or questioned. The officers said the whole thing worked for longer than it should have because he blended in well. He didn't look like someone doing anything shady. When I got home, I kept thinking about the moment he looked at his phone right before it all happened. That tiny flicker in his expression. I read it wrong. It wasn't nerves. It was him checking if it was time to move.
I'm honestly still confused how I ended up in that girl's flat because the whole thing started like one of those days where I wasn't even planning to meet anyone. I had been scrolling Hinge out of boredom again, the kind of boredom where you're just lying there staring at your phone, not even caring who you match with. She popped up with this bright smile and a messy bedroom behind her, and I don't know why, but I thought she seemed real. Not polished, not filtered. Just normal. She messaged first, which I like because I'm usually the one starting things. We talked for a bit, nothing deep, just stuff about work and food and random shows. She suggested chilling at hers since she said she didn't like going out when she wasn't in the mood. I know how dodgy that sounds now, but at the time it just felt convenient. She lived in a block of flats that looked normal enough. Nothing fancy, nothing broken down. Just average. When she buzzed me in, she told me her place was on the 3rd floor. I walked up because I didn't trust the lift. The hallway smelt like old cooking and cheap candles. Her door was already open a tiny bit when I got there. I pushed it gently and stepped inside, and that was when I saw them. 5 pairs of men's trainers lined up perfectly by the door. Same brand, same color, same size. Literally identical. It didn't look like someone collecting shoes. It looked like 5 people lived there. But the flat was small, like a one-bed at best. I stared at them for a second trying to make sense of it. Before I could say anything, she walked out from the kitchen holding 2 drinks and noticed me looking. She laughed it off straight away like it was nothing, saying something about liking matching stuff. But it didn't match her vibe. Her vibe was messy bedroom, random photos stuck on the wall, bed sheets that probably weren't folded properly. Those shoes were organized like someone who measured the distance between them. I tried not to overthink it because sometimes people just have weird habits, right? She seemed chill otherwise. Her flat was warm, a bit too warm, and there was this strong smell of some fruit candle burning in the corner. Sweet in a way that felt forced. She sat on the sofa and I sat in the chair opposite her. I tried to relax and just talk normally, but the more I looked around, the more small details started popping out. There was a phone stand pointed at the sofa. Not pointed at the TV, not pointed at the wall. Pointed exactly where someone would sit. There was another one half hidden near a stack of books. I don't know how I spotted it, but once you see one, your eyes automatically start scanning for more. I told myself maybe she makes makeup videos or something. But the angles were weird. Too low, too specific, and none of them were facing her. She talked a lot, really fast, like she was trying to cover up silence before it even started. She kept looking at her phone on the table but never picked it up. She kept asking random questions about my job, where I live, what gym I go to. Normal questions but asked like she was collecting data. I answered because I didn't want to be rude, but I kept glancing back at those trainers. 5 identical pairs. Not 4. Not 6. Exactly 5. We were talking about something random when the neighbors suddenly banged on the wall. Not a quiet knock. It was loud. Like someone smashing their fist into it on purpose. She froze for a second. Not scared, more like annoyed. Like she expected it but hoped tonight would be different. The banging kept going and then someone shouted through the wall. The voice sounded fed up, like this wasn't new. They yelled about her sneaking men in every week and streaming it. I didn't even understand what that meant at first. I thought they were accusing her of something random because people fight in flats all the time. She forced a smile and told me to ignore them. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her whole face had this weird stiffness to it. I couldn't tell if she was embarrassed or just irritated someone interrupted her plan, whatever that plan was. The banging stopped for a few seconds and I thought maybe they gave up. Then there was shouting outside in the hallway. Heavy footsteps. More voices. Her whole posture changed. She stood up too quickly and knocked one of the phone stands over. That's when I noticed the little lens on it was glowing faint red. Not bright, but enough that you'd know something was recording. Before she could pick it up, someone pounded hard on her front door. She backed away like she didn't want to be anywhere near it. The door burst open. Police rushed in like they'd been waiting for the exact second to move. I didn't even have time to stand up. They came straight into the living room shouting for everyone to stay where they were. I lifted my hands automatically even though I hadn't done anything. She tried to say something but one of the officers told her to sit down and not move. Her face went pale immediately. Not shocked pale. Caught pale. They started checking around the flat fast, looking under things, pulling curtains back, opening cupboards. One officer stayed with me and another stayed with her. I sat there trying to stay calm while my heart was beating like mad. The officer near me kept glancing at the fallen phone stand, then looked at the others scattered around the room. He asked me if I knew I was being recorded. I said no because I genuinely had no clue. After a few minutes, one of the neighbors from earlier came into the hallway talking to another officer. The neighbor was saying she'd been sneaking different men in every week, always around the same time, always for the same length of time. They said she had been running an online rent-a-boyfriend live stream, charging people to watch her bring guys over and act like they were dating her. Apparently it was like some weird subscription thing, and people would request certain types of men. They said the trainers were part of the act, making it look like she had regulars. The worst part for me was when one of the officers picked up the camera near the books and showed me the screen. I was still on it. The camera had been recording the entire time I'd been sitting in the chair. I looked so dumb sitting there drinking from the cup she handed me, having no clue I was part of some online show. They cuffed her and took her out. She didn't say anything. She didn't look back at me. She walked out like someone who had done this too many times and was just hoping the outcome would be different. The neighbors stood in their doors watching everything. I felt like some random extra in a show I never agreed to be in. The officers told me I wasn't in trouble and that they just needed a statement. I stepped outside the flat and saw another officer carrying out a box full of phones, all labeled, all facing the same direction. It made me think of the trainers by the door, all identical. Everything she did had a pattern behind it. When they finally let me go, I walked down the stairs instead of using the lift. My head felt heavy. I kept thinking about how normal she seemed online and how quick I was to trust it. I don't even remember how I got home. I just remember looking at my shoes when I walked into my place and thinking about those 5 pairs lined up, waiting for the next guy.
I don't really know how to explain this without sounding dramatic, but this whole thing started because I got bored one night and decided to go on Hinge again. I wasn't even looking for anything. I had just come back from work, my head was fried, and I thought scrolling might distract me. That's when I saw this guy. His profile looked almost too neat. Every picture had the same lighting, same angle, same kind of smile like he practiced it. His prompts were short but weirdly perfect, like he took ages making them sound effortless. At the time, I thought he was just one of those organized people who color code everything. I didn't think it meant something else. We matched fast. He messaged first, but even his messages felt rehearsed. He didn't type like normal guys who jump in with random jokes. He typed like someone checking items off a list. But he wasn't creepy. He was polite in that calm way, which I guess pulled me in because I was tired of dealing with chaotic people. When he suggested meeting up, I said yes. I didn't feel anything weird about it, just thought he was one of those very put-together guys. The kind that lays out clothes the night before and makes spreadsheets for breakfast or something. He picked a small restaurant, not fancy, just normal. But he mentioned he liked it because it was quiet and predictable. I didn't clock how strange that sounded until later. The first weird moment started before we even ordered. He sat down, straightened the cutlery without thinking, then checked his watch like he was timing something. He kept glancing at the entrance every couple of minutes. Not in a nervous way, more like he expected something to happen at a certain time. I asked him if he was waiting for someone else, but I didn't say it out loud. I just kept wondering. He wasn't looking at me much. He looked around the room, then checked his watch again, then looked at the entrance. It was like a loop he drilled into his head. I tried to convince myself he was just anxious, maybe socially awkward. I've met worse. But there was this weird energy coming off him. He wasn't sweating or shaking or anything, he was just too controlled. Like he knew exactly what he needed to do and exactly how long he needed to sit there doing it. He had a small notebook tucked into his jacket. The corner kept sticking out. I kept imagining he wrote down everything I said and rated it. While I was trying to act normal, his phone kept buzzing. Not in a constant way, just once every few minutes. He didn't check the messages. He would look at the screen, lock it again, check the entrance, check the time. The pattern felt too specific. And every time the screen lit up, his expression changed for half a second. It wasn't fear. It was like relief. Like something was going according to plan. The food came and he barely touched his. He kept glancing at the entrance again like he expected people he knew to walk in. This whole thing started to get uncomfortable, and I started thinking about leaving. But for some reason, I felt like I needed to stay a bit longer. Not because I liked him, but because there was something happening that I didn't understand yet. The moment everything flipped didn't feel real. I was in the middle of eating, thinking of how I'd end the night early, when a bunch of police officers walked straight into the restaurant. Not rushing. Not shouting. Just walking in like they'd been tracking something. They scanned the tables and headed right for us. I thought I had done something wrong. My whole body went stiff. The guy didn't move at first. He looked at them, checked his watch one more time, and let out this slow breath like he'd been waiting for this exact second. They told him to stand up. Again, no shouting. The whole place went silent. He stood up calmly, put his hands behind his back on his own, like he'd rehearsed that too. They cuffed him fast. When he was walking out, he didn't look scared. He didn't look surprised. He just looked annoyed. Like the timing was off by a few minutes. One officer stayed behind to talk to me. He asked me my name and confirmed I had met the guy through Hinge. I said yes, still trying to figure out how any of this was connected to me. The officer explained everything in this tired voice, like he'd said the same thing 100 times that week. The guy wasn't actually dating anyone. He had been using Hinge to build alibis. Every time he went out with someone new, it lined up with a break-in happening somewhere else in the city. He would pick a location, sit down, stay in visible places with witnesses, check his watch to keep track of timing, then leave at the exact right moment. It made it look like he couldn't have been anywhere near the houses that were getting broken into. The part that made my stomach drop was what the officer said next. While I was sitting across from him, while he was checking his watch every few minutes, another break-in was happening. Right then. At that exact moment. He wasn't anxious or distracted. He was timing the break-in. Someone else was doing it while he sat there acting polite and controlled and perfectly neat. They had been tracking him for a while. The police already knew he was connected to everything, but they needed to catch him mid-alibi because he kept slipping through. Tonight was the night the pattern matched again. They arrested him, walked him outside, and left the rest of us sitting there like nothing happened. He didn't look back at me. He didn't look at anyone. He just kept that rehearsed expression on his face like he'd already planned what he'd say next. I sat there for a few minutes after they left, just trying to understand how I ended up being part of someone's schedule like that. I wasn't a date. I wasn't someone he was interested in. I was basically a timestamp. Sometimes, when I think back on how he kept checking the entrance, I wonder if he was waiting for the police or waiting for a message saying the break-in was done. I still don't know which one is worse.